Like this strip of earth that forms a bridge between north and south, I arise from hidden depths when two tectonic plates collide. Where new land emerges, the ocean mother cleaves in two, transforms, and is transformed again through a chain of volcanic eruptions. As the fiery lava flows from deep within the scarred Earth's crust, the sediment layers, inscribing history deep within the buried rock. In time, the porous surface cracks open and breaks down, creating fertile soil, just as an airborne seedling settles and roots. Living creatures, lured by the green abundance, cross what was once a barrier to make this new place home. The cross-pollinated, enriching, creating, renewing, in this ever-present, ever-evolving landscape that we share, called Earth. At 11,260 feet above sea level, Volcán Irazú watches over me, an enduring and temperamental witness to transformation, from the moment the Cocos Plate subducted beneath the Caribbean Plate to ignite a chain reaction that would form this isthmus, bridging north and south. Upon collision, the two tectonic plates, one much smaller than the other, vied violently for position. They melted the Earth's upper mantle and crust, and summoned upward the scorching magma that would birth not only Irazú, but her myriad siblings. Each an island unto itself, rupture by rupture, and layer by layer, the volcanoes grew. After 150 million years of teenage rebellion that propelled lava, ash, and rock as far as it would go, they eventually stretched across the shrinking ocean's expanse and adhered to one another. Conjoined and no longer separate, these land-making volcanoes formed the final piece of the intercontinental land bridge, now known as Costa Rica and Panama. In March of this year, I celebrated my 6th anniversary of my return to Costa Rica, my country of birth and where I spent my early childhood. Though I have since lived in the United States, and for a few years in Germany, it is the Central Valley of San Jose and the verdant volcanic mountains that my eyes and heart recognize as home. The valley's long-term residents would be hard-pressed to see me as one of their own. With my now Americanized Spanish accent, I no longer sound like a tica, so I no longer present as one. Los Josefinos know it, and intellectually I know it too. It's only my body that screams, "But wait, I'm from here!" And so begins the internalized dissonance I have always carried with me. Irazú, my watchkeeper, and her nearby sister Torrealba stand head and shoulders above Costa Rica's still active volcanoes. But in the last 30 years, Irazú, as she was once known by the indigenous, has remained relatively quiet. Her first historically recorded eruption occurred on February 16, 1723, and continued in volatile bursts for another year, with major blocks of material exploding into the air and with blankets of ash covering the nearby colonial capital of Cartago, as well as settlements in Curridabat. Irazú's unpredictable explosions continued throughout the next century and into the 20th, when she famously greeted President John F. Kennedy's 1963 state visit by throwing up lava bombs, glowing cinders, and a tremendous amount of ash that over the next 2 years would collapse mountainside roofs and cause all manner of eye, nose, and throat irritations among the many living beings in the Central Valley. 7 people died attempting to watch an eruption at close range in 1964, and when the rains came, a mudflow of ash obliterated hundreds of homes in the foothills of Taraz. Finding peace in a disquieted body. Is it even possible? This is the question I have asked myself, consciously or not, my entire life. Apart from time spent in nature, I know this unease is tied to an ambivalent identity, a feeling that I belong neither here nor there, that I cannot be a part of this group or that group, that from birth I was marked other by virtue of my mixed parentage. This sense of being an outsider is not uncommon for third culture kids, who were raised in a culture other than their parents or the culture of their country of nationality, and who also live in a different environment during a significant part of their child development years. In our increasingly globalized world, it should come as no surprise that the number of TCKs is growing by leaps and bounds, as parents and guardians either choose or are forced to cross borders in order to make the most of their lives. For those fortunate enough to escape calamity or persecution, being a multilingual, culturally savvy TCK has its advantages. In my immediate family, this search for vocation and opportunity in foreign lands stretches back to both my northern and southern grandparents, and the itchy feet willing to travel did not stop with their generation. I like to joke with those who find my background confusing that I am a tica gringa, because I was born to a Costa Rican Bolivian father and a US American mother, and it amuses me to tell my friends that my blonde and blue-eyed half-brothers speak better Spanish than I do. They, after all, spent most of their childhoods and early teens in Spanish-speaking lands. Though I spoke Spanish exclusively for the first 6 years of my life, I also grew up hearing and understanding English from birth. My mother recalls that when I played with my Fisher-Price castle, I would often sing all the characters' parts in little operettas. She knew which ones were the English speakers, because I would mimic my mother's gringa accent in Spanish. Our family, from the very beginning, preferred time spent outdoors. Almost all our photos were taken outside. On weekends, we took day trips from the Central Valley to visit the nearby volcanoes of Poás and Irazú, and to eat picnics on the mountainside, the first when I was only 2 weeks old. During the holidays, we ventured further out and took week-long camping trips to the secluded beaches of Guanacaste. At night, we slept in tents, and during the day, in hammocks stretched out between the trees. We swam in the ocean, played in the sand, read, slept, relaxed, and practiced a 1970s version of sustainable ecotourism, decades before the term would even come into vogue. We brought our own tank of fresh water for drinking, a propane tank for cooking, our own dishes and cutlery to eat the simple meals my mom prepared over the camp stove. Afterwards, she washed the dishes with sand and rinsed them in the sea. On the way home, we would stop at Hacienda La Pacifica, where the owners allowed us to bathe in the freshwater river, and where we would eat a delicious meal in the restaurant run by their Swiss son-in-law. Later, in our camper pickup, we would travel the length of the isthmus up and down to visit my grandparents in Texas. On these family expeditions, we would swim in the streams near Monterrey, and I would run alongside my father, a dormant Guatemalan volcano visible in the distance. Irazú lies mostly dormant at present, though the volcanologists who monitor her and her nearby siblings are keeping an eye on her hydrothermal system and the potential for phreatic or steam explosions. For now, life on the mountainside colossus continues as usual. The native ferns and epiphytes grow in her montane cloud forests, and her flowering plants and herbs sustain the hummingbirds, bees, insects, lizards, snakes, and mammals who make this place home. Dormancy, however, is a deceptive designation, and Irazú a restless sleeper. Using tephrochronological data to date and correlate her geologic activity, Volcanologists have determined that over the course of the last 2,600 years, she has remained relatively quiet for as little as 23 years, or as long as 100. Through their work, they remind us that Irazú is always potentially active, and historically known to produce a major event every 85 years. The day I watched my father break my mother's nose in our kitchen, everything changed. I ran out to the patio and screamed so loudly, the neighbors called the police. This explosive eruption, smoldering just beneath the surface, had been building for years. My father's ingrained militarist behavior, from his time spent serving as a United States Marine Corps drill sergeant, had grown more erratic. He was not averse to using physical threats and violence to control our household. My mother had already sent my teenage brothers to live with my grandparents in Texas, so it was just the three of us left in the house. After that fight, my father took me to my aunt and uncle's, and for 2 weeks, my father was the one who brought me to school and picked me up. My mother, desperate to see me, came to the school one day only to find her little girl scared and trembling. I was afraid of what would happen when my father showed up, and so was she. Not long after that, he took both of my passports and walked me across the Panamanian border to avoid official questioning. In Panama City, we took a flight to Quito, Ecuador. Whenever I stop now to contemplate that chasm of ruptured time, characterized by a 6-week bout of dissociative amnesia that has forever untethered me from who I was before, it is almost as if my early childhood belongs to someone else, a little girl lost, not only to me, but to those who knew and loved her then. As a young child who experienced severe trauma in the form of a 9-month parental abduction preceded by exposure to domestic violence, I have long recognized the before and after of who I am, and what it means to carry the burden of a family's shame in my body. For those 9 months we were on the run throughout South America, and until we reached California, I was stuck with my father's unpredictable decision-making. I did not have a choice in the matter. Despite recognizing that he was not well in the head, even his own family was too scared of his possible outbursts to help return me to my mother. They chose, consciously or not, to appease him, to sacrifice my well-being for his, to passively just hope for the best. Tu papá era un poquito loco aquí, my tia said to me when I visited her in Quito in 2015. It was the only reference she would make to my time living there as a 6-year-old. Like Heidi from the Johannes Spiri children's novel, who was also forcibly taken from her home at a young age, I too stopped eating for a few weeks. I slept in the attic loft with my cousin and imagined myself to be Heidi when I looked out of the small round window at the mountainside and towards Cotopaxi. The Andes were my longed-for alpine landscape, and in my fantasy world, I could better escape from the claustrophobic reality of my restricted situation. But all remembrance falls into a black hole from the time my father and I left my aunt's house in Quito, and for the 42 days we traveled in Bolivia and Peru. The stamps in my childhood passport outline the trajectory of our journey, so I know where I was, but the only picture memory, the only memory period, that I can conjure from that time is of looking out of the plane window to see the snow-capped Andes and wondering, as any young child might, about the difference between clouds and snow. Irazú's volcanic eruptions, on a grand scale, can result in not only loss of life, but the complete eradication of ecological habitats. Whether through toxic gas and ash emissions, pyroclastic flows, wildfires, landslides, or mudslides, eruptive activity has the potential to render what once existed null and void. Explosive gray eruptions like these can destroy what lies in their wake, but at the same time, they create new layers of ground, and with it, the possibility for renewal and transformation. Rich in magnesium and potassium, volcanic rock and ash are known to produce extremely fertile soils that in the realm of an agricultural existence can result in increased harvests in the years that follow an eruption. The farmers who have worked Irazú's fertile slopes since the 1963 to 1965 eruptions are familiar with the bounties she has reaped and continues to reap on Costa Rica's behalf. In visceral ways, I can still recall a glimmer of the child I was prior to the age of 6, in the adult Diana who still relishes the taste of guayaba paste candy. That identity, out of necessity, is separate from the me whose body and mind were altered to survive the sudden and complete separation from all I had known to ground me, my mother, my home, and my birth soil. The me who emerged on this side of life was internally scarred, but nonetheless fortunate, is still fortunate and grateful, despite the irretrievable loss. Some of the layers may no longer be accessible, but they still inform, and at times guide, the ways I interact with the world around me. It took millions of years of volcanic activity to complete the Central American Isthmus 3 million years ago. But it also took strong ocean currents, peeling away massive amounts of sand, soil, and mud from North and South America to fill the gaps in between. The partition created by this newly formed land bridge meant that the Pacific and Atlantic could no longer flow freely, which caused currents in both bodies of water to reroute. The isthmus's formation marked a transformative moment in Earth's geologic history, one that directly and indirectly influenced ocean and atmospheric circulation patterns, which regulated patterns of rainfall, which in turn sculpted landscapes. The making and remaking of our Earth is mostly imperceptible to the human eye, and yet, on a rare, clear day atop Irazú, one can see both the Atlantic and Pacific that shaped her. When my father returned me to my mother at the LAX airport in the spring of 1979, I ran to her and she to me. In her embrace, I was reconnected with what I had lost. In her arms, I was showered with the love and nourishment I had missed and required. My maternal grandparents stepped in to help, and the three of them, from that point on, provided the stability I needed in that delicate time to feel safe and secure. At the age of 7, I started my life over again, albeit in a country and landscape I barely recognized, and that was dominated by my mother's tongue, one I understood, but did not speak well. I never felt fully at ease in that flat, yellow land of Amarillo, so different from my green, mountainous home, but the experience taught me a tremendous lesson, that living beings are built with an extraordinary capacity for resilience when blessed early on with the light of another's kindness. So why does my body persist in this disquieted state, even when my conscious and rational mind knows that all is well? For most of my adult life, I silently suffered the long-term consequences of what happened to me as a child, but in midlife, I reached a crisis point and knew I needed help. In the 45-plus years since my parental abduction, the only place I have ever found a lasting sense of bodily solace and reprieve, other than inside my therapist's office, is when I am surrounded by nature. Shy in social situations, I often tended to fade into the background, but out of doors, I felt free and self-confident. I could enjoy the silence and not feel obligated to speak in a way that felt unnatural to me. At 16, I walked through the Mittenwald trails on my own, and lying down to bask in the sun, I could literally feel the peace of an earthly connection wash over me. 2 years later, I would hike in the Swiss Alps with friends, finally realizing a lifelong dream that reconnected me to the Heidi stories where I had found so much comfort during my abduction. Even now, as I write this from my recovered childhood home, I am comforted by the light breeze coming in through the open window and the songs of the birds who share this neighborhood with me, the jigueros, the white-winged doves, the great kiskadis. When I lack this type of contact with nature, my body is restless and alert, always scanning my immediate surroundings to assess the situation. This acquired trait has its advantages. It made me an excellent student and employee, one who is very good with planning, logistics, and attention to detail. In my late 30s, my trusted therapist of 5 years gave this prevailing tendency of mine a name, one I had only ever associated with soldiers and war veterans: post-traumatic stress disorder. My therapist then was an important part of my personal recovery equation, but so was Mother Nature and my instinct to go outside. I had known and felt this tranquility as a young child, so when I listened to my heart, I knew what to do. I turned to the great outdoors for healing. After the death of my father in 2011, and after my partner and I were unable to conceive. After each of these difficult, life-altering events, we hiked together for days, first along the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu, and then later through the jungles of the Corcovado National Park. Knowing I would not become a mother, we trekked the grueling 18 kilometers from Karate Beach to Serena Ranger Station, where with every step on the hot, humid trail, I walked to relinquish the pain of my grief. During these 3 days, in the primeval forest with our guide, I feared only one thing: coming face to face with a terciopelo, a pit viper. In the pre-dawn hour the following day, one crossed a path right in front of me, a small juvenile who slithered quickly past before I could take my next step. In that quick, frozen moment of terror, I suddenly realized that this snake did not seek to harm, but rather, like me, just wanted to live another day. In July of 2019, we visited Irazú at close range. The drive was dizzying as we wound up the narrow mountain road with its sharp curves and the sensation, as we climbed up and up, that one could literally fall off the edge without too much effort. We passed the entryway to Sanatorio Duran and the Prussia sector forest, and in the span of 1 kilometer, saw Irazú's grassy meadows awash in sunshine, and then blanketed by a light fog that grew thicker as we ascended. We spent that night in a farmhouse cottage that looked out on the onion and potato fields that nourished the valley's residents. And the next morning, as soon as the clouds cleared, we drove the last 7 kilometers to the entrance of the national park. It was cold and windy as we trekked across the gray, almost extraterrestrial terrain, until we reached the main crater, where we could see the familiar giant leaves of the Sombría de Pobre and the magnificent blue waters of Irazú's sometimes disappearing lake. Still on Earth, I thought, as I felt the embrace of this awe-inspiring wilderness, where I could find the unencumbered space I needed to allow my body to soften and breathe with ease, to find connection and rootedness, to acknowledge that a love of the outdoors was and is the unquestionable inheritance my parents gave me, along with the seismic discord and harm. Since late March of 2020, when the pandemic brought so much of human activity to a halt, I look out from my second-story window and greet her. Buenos dias, Irazú. For a year, I had not even realized she was there, right in front of me. From our busy suburb, I can only make out the jagged outline of her crater and the line of telecommunication towers perched upon her highest points. And still, every morning, she calls out to me, a constant reminder of the all she has seen before and the all she will experience when I am gone. Contemplating her form, I am aware of what little time remains, and in a strange way, this brings me comfort. My body, too, records its own history of rupture and repair, undergoes continuous transformation, and changes imperceptibly each day, all while still breathing and absorbing what it means to be alive. Is an openness to change the way to cultivate peace in a disquieted body? Irazú, in her own way, models a path forward. She is a touchstone and a tangible thread, one that ties me back to the past, that holds me at peace in this present, and that stretches out into the magnificent unknown.
If you want to support our project, you can share this episode, visit our digital magazine wimblu.com, subscribe to our newsletter, or join our Patreon community where you can access exclusive content starting at $3 a month. Your support allows us to create and share content that reimagines a fair and healthy world for all life forms.